Добрый день.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, dear colleagues, dear guests. Today is the 15th of April, 2022. It is 12 a.m. Moscow time. We're beginning the session of the Dissertation Council for the defense of the dissertation of Timur Khairulin. The dissertation is submitted in conformity with requirements for the academic degree of the candidate of Economic Sciences, Scientific Specialty 591, Russian Literature and Literature of the Peoples of the Russian Federation. The topic of the dissertation is Literalist Strategy of Viktor Krivulin in 1970s and early 1980s. Let us have technical break number 1.
Технический перерыв номер...
Technical break number 1 is over. Let us continue the session of the Dissertation Council. The dissertation was written by Timur Khairulin. It was submitted in conformity with the requirements for the degree of the candidate of philological sciences. Under the order issued by the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University, I, Professor Svetlana Titarenko, Doctor of Philological Sciences, Professor of the Department of Russian Literature of St. Petersburg State University, has been appointed the chairperson of the Dissertation Council. The other members of the Dissertation Council have been appointed by the same order. They are Professor Lyubov, or rather Professor Galina Boeva, Doctor of Philological Sciences, St. Petersburg State University of Industrial Technology and Design. Professor Yuri Orlitsky, Doctor of Philological Sciences, Leading Research Fellow of the Russian State Humanitarian University. Some members of the Dissertation Council are participating in the session online. They are Professor Lyubov Bugaeva, Doctor of Philological Sciences, Assistant Professor of the Department of Russian Literature of St. Petersburg State University. Can you hear us and see us? Yes, I can hear you and see you. Besides, Professor Ichin Cornelia, Doctor of Philological Sciences, Professor at Belgrade, at the University of Belgrade, Serbia. Can you hear us? Can you hear us and see us? Yes, I can hear you and see you. The candidate for the academic degree is also here. The research supervisor, assistant professor of St. Petersburg State University, Yulia Valieva, is also here. I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council who are participating in this session online to switch off their microphones. Please make sure that your microphone is switched on when you are given the floor. The session of the Dissertation Council is being recorded and broadcast on the official website of St. Petersburg State University, and it is also being interpreted from Russian into English. You can ask your questions and comments about the dissertation using the email address that you can find on the official website of St. Petersburg State University. You can ask questions or express your opinion about the dissertation. This will allow you to participate in the academic discussion. The technical personnel will refer the questions to me and I will read them out during the discussion. The questions are supposed to be relevant to the contents of the dissertation. The authors of the questions are to write down their name, position and workplace. The questions that are not relevant to the contents of the dissertation or anonymous questions will not be read out. Under the order on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University issued by St. Petersburg State University, the session of the Dissertation Council is duly constituted, provided at least 2/3 of the members of the Dissertation Council are present. The total number is not to be fewer than 4 people. The Dissertation Council consists of 5 people, 5 of which are present, including 2 people who are participating in the session online. Therefore, we have a quorum. I would like to ask the representative of the Department for Dissertation Council Management to make an attendance list. The agenda is as follows. The session will last for about 2 hours. The chairman's presentation about the documents submitted by the academic degree seeker and their conformity with the requirements. The chairperson's reply to questions, if any. Next, the degree seeker's presentation providing an overview and findings of the research, about 15 minutes. Next, questions to the degree seeker regarding the presentation, no more than 2 minutes per person. Replies to the questions, no more than 5 minutes overall. Next, reports on the dissertation. The council members will be taking the floor in turns to read out their reports, about 10 minutes per person. The chairperson's report on the dissertation. The degree seekers' comments about the reports on the dissertation and replies to the questions, no more than 20 minutes. Next, open discussion. The floor will be given to the members of the audience. They can give a brief account of their ideas or ask questions about the research. No more than 2 minutes per person. It is necessary to fill in the registration form and give their full name, academic degree and workplace before the talk. The questions, which take more than 2 minutes to read, will not be read out. However, I will read out the questions received via email. However, I would like to emphasize that I will not be reading out longer questions. Next, replies to the questions. Then we'll have a presentation of the dissertation supervisor. Next, deliberations of the members of the Dissertation Council before the open balloting on conferring or non-conferring the academic degree. The discussion of the results of the defense is not broadcast. Next, open balloting, vote counting and recording the results in the protocol. And we will make a decision about whether to confer or not to confer the academic degree. The next item on the agenda is the degree seeker's closing speech, no more than 2 minutes. Dear colleagues, do you have any questions or objections to the agenda? There are no questions, therefore would like to proceed with the agenda. Dear colleagues who are attending this session of the Dissertation Council online, please leave your telephones set on a silent mode so that we can contact you in case of a technical failure, but please switch off your microphones for the time being. So I would like to proceed with the agenda. My presentation about the academic degree seeker and the dissertation. The dissertation was written by Timur Khairulin. It was submitted in conformity with the degree of the candidate of philological sciences, scientific specialty 591, Russian literature and literature of the peoples of the Russian Federation. The topic of the dissertation is literary strategy of Viktor Krivulin in 1970s, early 1980s. The dissertation was approved for the defense by the order of the Academic Secretary of St. Petersburg State University. The dissertation was completed in St. Petersburg State University. Mr. Khairulin was a postgraduate student. His research supervisor is Assistant Professor of St. Petersburg State University, Yulia Valieva. The academic degree seeker has published 3 papers, including two papers which have been published in peer-reviewed journals recommended by the Ministry of Education and Science, and 1 paper was published in a journal indexed by Scopus, and 2 papers were published in a journal indexed by the Web of Science. The documents are in compliance with the requirements, and the documents are stored in the dossier. The representative of the Department for Dissertation Council Management has the copies of the documents. Before giving the floor to the academic degree seeker, I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council if they have any questions, any general questions to the academic degree seeker, and if it is necessary to read out the list of documents. There are no questions, I suppose. Thank you. Now, I would like to give the floor to the academic degree seeker. So the floor is given to Timur Khairulin. The floor is yours. Good afternoon, dear members of the Dissertation Council, dear colleagues. Let me present the research findings of my dissertation, which is devoted to one of the leading authors of Leningrad unofficial literature, Viktor Krivulin. Here I would like to emphasize that Viktor Krivulin's literary works have not become a subject of a comprehensive research, which shows the novelty of my research. In my dissertation, I focus on his literary strategy. The topic of the dissertation is relevant because it is necessary to reconstruct a comprehensive image of the intellectual history of late Soviet literature, as well as to adjust the existing assumptions about official and unofficial culture. Moreover, we should fill in the gaps, including those in the area of self-published books. And Viktor Krivulin was one of the leading writers of uncensored literature in 1970. Besides, he was also a theorist and an editor of different self-published magazines. And in my dissertation, I come to the conclusion that Viktor Krivulin referred to culture, which became an important aspect in his works. The dissertation consists of 3 chapters structurally, but it is also divided into 2 bigger parts. The first part of the dissertation focuses on his literary work, and the second part of the dissertation focuses on the analysis of the critical texts. As a critic, Viktor Krivulin made assessment of the works of his contemporary writers, and he also wanted to give a description of the unofficial literature. I also analyzed specific mechanisms which allowed Viktor Krivulin to create his cultural project and to develop its specific features. Krivulin's literary works of 1970s is characterized by the following aspects. Number 1, a new approach to personality and history in the context of non-conformism. Number 2, reconstruction of links with traditional Russian modernism. And number 3, transformation of lyrical subjectivity, which was expressed in using the pronoun we. It showed that Viktor Krivulin realized that there was a specific community created in the unofficial culture. When analyzing literary works by Krivulin, I draw upon the works by Professor Lodman, by Etkin, Gasparov, Boitman, and also I also draw upon literary works written by Tupa, Chevtaev, and so on. Besides, it was important for me to analyze the works on intellectual history written by Spitzer, Ginsburg, and the theory of topos by Kursos. Some aspects of Krivulin's literary work is studied through the light of meta-history by White and through the light of the theory developed by the German historian Koselleck. In the second part of the dissertation, I analyze Viktor Krivulin's work as a literary critic. I also focus on the category of spirituality in his works. The religious and philosophic analysis or perception of literary poems was in line with the concept of the Journal 37. According to this concept, religion was part and parcel of the cultural movement. In my dissertation, I describe the activities of 37 Journal. I also write about its editorial policy and the main debates. For example, in the second chapter, I focus on the public debate between Viktor Krivulin and Boris Grossman, the philosopher Boris Grossman, about the exhibition of painters in 1975. It shows that Viktor Krivulin had his own metaphysical approach to culture. And an important idea here is that art and poetry was sort of de-autonomized. As a result, we see the comparison of Russian poetry with the church. And in my dissertation, I show that this system of ideas later on was revised by Viktor Krivulin himself. In the third chapter, I touch upon the issue of Krivulin's interpretation of works written during Soviet times. Here I draw upon the concept of the anthropologist Yurchak. I also show that it is expedient to use Yurchak's interpretation of Bakhtin's term exotopy, which is regarded as a specific sphere not regulated by the Soviet state. In my dissertation, I show that Viktor Krivulin's literary critique included different genres, and it also had a philological aspect, since he graduated from Leningrad State University, from the philological faculty of Leningrad State University. As a result, we can say that the philological aspect was so characteristic of Krivulin's work, because semiotic studies were popular in those times. In the third chapter, I also come to the conclusion that Viktor Krivulin's literary critique is an attempt to conduct a comprehensive analysis of literary work, whether it belongs to official literature or to unofficial literature. Moreover, Viktor Krivulin gave his own assessment to the historical moment. Besides, I would like to say that in my dissertation I also analyze some literally critical texts written by Viktor Krivulin, which have not been studied before. I came across these texts when I was working in the Pushkin house. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your presentation. I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council, do you have any questions about the presentation? Or do you have any questions about the dissertation itself? If you have any questions, you can ask them. I suppose there are no questions about the presentation. Now, I would like to proceed with the agenda. Now the members of the Dissertation Council will be taking the floor in turns in order to read out their reports. I give the floor to Professor Khairulin so that she can provide her assessment of the dissertation. Thank you very much. As far as I understand, I don't have to read it out because it was posted. Is this correct? Yes, it's correct. It is posted on the official website, so you can focus only on the most relevant parts. What would you like to say and what questions do you have? I would like to start with the end. I would like to congratulate Timur Khairulin on writing such an important dissertation, and I would like to emphasize that this is a very important work, and it is one of the first dissertations that have been written about Viktor Krivulin's literary works, and it is a great contribution to philology, especially to those who study literature of 1980s and 1990s. As for the dissertation itself, I would like to say that this dissertation encompasses the context of the epoch itself. The dissertation also discusses the role of Viktor Krivulin in unofficial literature and unofficial culture. So the dissertation discusses a different culture. And I would like to say that this aspect of the dissertation is really important. Moreover, Timur Khairulin also draws upon archival materials. And I suppose Timur Khairulin is the only one who is familiar with these archives. But the dissertation itself consists of 3 chapters. The dissertation provides interpretation of the poetic works and literary critical works of Viktor Krivulin. This dissertation is very well written, and the author of the dissertation understands the context, understands the background, understands the environment, and also understands his links with immigration journals and newspapers. Viktor Krivulin cooperated with immigrants authors, and it also proves the status of the unofficial culture. In this regard, I can say that Timur Khairulin continues the work of his research supervisor, and this type of continuity is really important in science. So I hope that his future research will also deal with unofficial literature and maybe more modern literature. When I was reading the text of the dissertation, some questions, or rather ideas, arose, and I would like to share some comments. I believe that you should have focused more on religious, metaphorical aspects of Krivulin's poetry. Krivulin himself writes about Borotinsky, and sometimes he doesn't differentiate between his own voice and that of Borotinsky. So I would like to ask about the role of Borotinsky in Krivulin's literary work. Borotinsky was important not only for Krivulin, but he was also important for Brodsky. So how do you regard the role of Borotinsky in this regard? And I would also like to ask you about the role of Borotinsky in the community in general, in the writers' community in general. Also would like to say that it would be interesting to see how Helena Schwartz and Leonid Arazon wrote their works in the context. And I also have a small question, or rather a comment, about something you wrote at the end of your dissertation. At the end of the dissertation, you write about Krivulin's ideas that there is no upper limit when we talk about the literary works of Harms and Vedensky. Viktor Krivulin emphasizes that there are some gaps here. So I would like you to tell me what you think about it. Thank you. And I would like to congratulate you on writing such an interesting and important work. Thank you very much. Professor Ichin. We have not received any external reviews. Now I will give the floor to other members of the Dissertation Council. But here I would like to remind you that the academic degree seeker can answer the questions after each report is read or after all the reports have been read. It's up to you. I suggest that you answer all the questions after all the reports have been read out. Do you agree? Yes. What about the members of the Dissertation Council? Do you agree? Now let us proceed with the agenda. I give the floor to the member of the Dissertation Council, Doctor of Philological Sciences, Professor Lyubov Bugaeva. Thank you, dear members of the Dissertation Council. The dissertation focuses on the literary strategy of Viktor Krivulin, which is understood as a system of principles governing the text, which allows to express the author's position, mindset, and his aesthetics. It should be noted that the dissertation has scientific novelty, and it is also well written and logically written. The dissertation contains lots of new ideas. However, I have some questions. At the beginning of your dissertation, you distance yourself from the sociological approach, including the approach by Berg. However, I suppose you could have drawn upon some principles which we see in the works by Berg, namely the concept of internal migration. Berg interprets this strategy as a search for new social space. For example, in the novel by Victor Krivulin, well, I realized that you did not analyze the novel, so this novel analyzes the issues of internal and external migration. And all immigrant writers were divided on the issue of immigration. Some of them really strived for external immigration, while others believed that immigration would be a treachery of the strategy. So they wanted to find another way out. They wanted to create the space for internal immigration. Another important issue was the issue of compromise. So I suppose that internal immigration and external immigration distanced from Soviet culture, and they appealed to the repressed culture, namely to the cultural practices of the Silver Age. The second issue I would like to discuss is the structure of we. Victor Krivulin represents the subject structure of we as expanding the horizontal I. However, I suppose you could have referred to the we narration analysis and to the opposition of the one versus the many, which we see in works by Monica Fludernik. I suppose you could have used her terms in the dissertation. Timur Khairulin is familiar with lots of scholarly works. However, he did not analyze the work by Clint Walker. The article published by Clint Walker in 1999, The Spirits of the Leningrad Underground, Victor Krivulin's Communion with Russian Modernism. There are some also small inaccuracies in the dissertation. So Victor Krivulin didn't publish, but he sort of reprinted his journal, which was a common practice in those times. Here I'm talking about the journals 37, The Clock and Echo, and so on. However, my questions and comments do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation. The dissertation is a great contribution to science. I already have seen other scholars refer to Timur Khairulin's papers. This is a very serious research which has the dissertation, the reference list includes more than 200 items. So the dissertation by Timur Khairulin complies with the major requirements set forth in order on the procedure of granting academic degree at St. Petersburg State University, and Timur Khairulin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of philological sciences. Thank you. Thank you very much. Let us continue. I give the floor to the member of the Dissertation Council, Doctor of Philological Sciences, Professor Galina Boyeva. The floor is yours. I don't have any doubts about the relevance of the dissertation. The dissertation fills in the gaps in the history of Russian literature. And he also writes about the key figure in Russian uncensored, or even in Leningrad uncensored literature. Moreover, I would like to say that he was right when he used specific research methods. He also draws upon the sociological research and anthropological research, which is relevant for the dissertation since it deals with the self-published books and newspapers. The dissertation provides a new insight into the literary process of 1970s and 1980s, and it also restores the intellectual context of late Soviet culture. So the dissertation has practical and theoretical significance. I would like to emphasize that the author of the dissertation introduces new texts in the scientific discourse. I'm not going to talk about the structure of the dissertation. The dissertation contains credible research findings. The main research findings refer to the specific features of the cultural project. He also writes about the intertextuality of his works, and namely about the links with the Silver Age. He also writes about spirituality as the main specific feature of Krivulin's discourse, and namely the discourse of the age of stagnation. There is no opposition between official and unofficial Soviet and non-Soviet in the dissertation. He reconstructs the complex literary image of the period that he studies. He also focuses on different types of literature, the literature which was published, and also self-published magazines. I have some comments about the dissertation, or rather suggestions. I would like to say that you should have paid more attention to the portrait of the reader of self-published literature, since you used the sociological method in your dissertation. So who was the general reader of Krivulin's literature? Besides, I suppose that the context plays a very important role in the work. However, you ignore the context of Leningrad everyday life. Still, the critical remarks or the suggestions do not change the overall positive assessment of the dissertation, and I suppose Timur Khairulin should be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of philological sciences. Thank you. Thank you very much. Now I would like to give the floor to the Doctor of Philological Sciences, Professor Yuri Orlitsky. The floor is yours. Dear colleagues, I would like to thank you for giving me an opportunity to participate in the session of the Dissertation Council. I'm really honored to be here. This is a very important event. We're discussing contemporary literature, and this dissertation is a sort of a turning point in literary studies. The dissertation deals with uncensored literature which has not been studied as a specific concept before. Probably Brodsky was the only one who was studied in this regard when it comes to Leningrad literature, and the other authors were ignored, and I do not approve of this approach. We have a very unusual picture here. Works by the representatives of Leningrad underground are published and republished, and there is not enough research in the area, and I suppose this dissertation is a breakthrough in the area. This is a unique dissertation. It is very interesting also. And it is important to say that Timur Khairulin was able to focus both on the poetic works by Viktor Krivulin and on his critical works. He uses the term the cultural project, and this is the term that I approve of. The dissertation has a solid foundation. Timur Khairulin also introduces some new texts into the scientific discourse, and this also gives extra value to the dissertation. Probably many people will not be able to read these texts since they are stored in the manuscripts department. I'm planning to go to the manuscripts department myself, and I envisage that I will come across some difficulties in getting in there. So I would like to say that I really appreciate the approach undertaken by Timur Khairulin. You also focus on the literary tradition, which also gives credibility to the dissertation. Sometimes when you write about contemporary literature, you sort of focus only on the empirical material, but this dissertation is different. It has a scientific framework, it has a theoretical framework and an empirical part. Therefore, I suppose this is not just a serious dissertation, but it is also a very interesting dissertation, and I suppose it merits the academic degree of the candidate. However, there is some inaccuracy. There's only one inaccuracy in the dissertation at the beginning of the dissertation. Now, I would like to read out my own report. I also believe that Timur Khairulin carried out a comprehensive research, and this is the first comprehensive research of Krivulin's literary works. Timur Khairulin puts his research in the context of self-published literature. And self-published literature has not been comprehensively researched before, and the dissertation contains comprehensive analysis of the self self-published literature. Moreover, literary works and literary activity of Viktor Krivulin are integrated in the context of the Soviet culture. Viktor Krivulin's works form the so-called cultural project, and the discourse also contains, Viktor Krivulin's discourse contains the aspects which throw some light on his theoretical views. The author of the dissertation fills in the gaps in self-published literature. He also analyzes the manuscripts which have not been studied before. The dissertation has practical and theoretical significance. At present, there are no dissertations or monographs dealing with the literary works by Viktor Krivulin. Therefore, this dissertation is a very important stage. The dissertation also has scientific novelty. The dissertation analyzes and interprets literary texts which reveal different aspects of the cultural project. Besides, the dissertation also draws upon modern literary concepts and uses relevant scientific methods. Besides, Timur Khairulin has developed a comprehensive approach which incorporates Russian and international research. Besides, Timur Khairulin also writes about the literary heritage in the context of Russian modernism and the poetry of the Silver Age. He has also conducted a very comprehensive intertextual analysis. Krivulin's works are also regarded through the spiritual mystical tradition. The author of the dissertation also studies the editorial policies of the magazine 37, and this analysis can be very prospective study in the future. However, there are some things I would like to comment on. You have developed a very successful, comprehensive analysis. However, you do not justify such methods as receptive aesthetics. Works by Iser and Jaus are mentioned in the dissertation. For example, in the first chapter, you write about the literary strategy, and you talk about the strategy of the text and the strategy of the reader as the communicative aspects of a literary work. Therefore, I suppose you should provide explanation. Receptive aesthetics is important for the work, or do you believe that the horizon of expectations should not be used when analyzing self-published literature? You also write about literary strategy, and you draw upon the narrow approach without the sociological aspect, and I see some contradiction here, because you write about unofficial literature. Therefore, the sociological aspect is important here. You say that you understand that literary strategy is understood as a system of principles of the text organization, which expresses the author's stance, mindset, and aesthetics. I suppose there is some contradiction with the methods of the work, which are based, among other things, on the theory by White and Kozelek, which deal with historical perception and topos of history. It is not quite clear why you do not draw upon the works on structuralism by Yuri Lotman and his culturological studies. I suppose such works are important to justify the concept of the cultural project. And I suppose Lotman developed a very important approach to interpreting the problem of the culture and text. Works by White are, of course, very interesting, especially for interdisciplinary studies. However, you disregard the work by Smirnov, Mega History to the Historical Typology of Culture, published in 2000. Does not play an important work in your analysis of the cultural project. I would like to say that these are not critical remarks, these are rather, these are questions. I would like to say that this dissertation contains a complex analysis. It is relevant, it has a scientific and practical significance. The text of the dissertation clearly covers the topic of the dissertation, and the structure of the dissertation is also in line with the contents of the dissertation. I also would like to say that the author should be given merit for providing a specific guideline for analysis. The research findings have been published in a number of papers. Some aspects of the analysis are very important for the dissertation and are other achievements of the author. The dissertation is interesting to read, and it also contains archival materials, and it deals with the most important aspects of Victor Krivulin's literary work. So I recommend that you publish a monograph based on the dissertation. So the dissertation by Timur Khairulin complies with the major requirements set forth in order as of the 19th of September 2021, number 11181/1 on the procedure of granting academic degrees at St. Petersburg State University. And Timur Khairulin can be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of Philological Sciences, Scientific Specialty 591, Russian Literature and Literature of the Peoples of the Russian Federation. So, that is the end of my report. I give the floor to the academic degree seeker. Please answer the questions.
Членов диссертационного совета.
Прежде всего, я хотел бы...
First of all, I would like to say that I'm thankful to the members of the Dissertation Council.
На себя труд не только ознакомиться.
So thank you for reading my dissertation and for writing the reports, and thank you for showing interest in my research. And also thank you for most valuable questions and comments. Now I would like to answer the questions I would like to start from the end. Professor Titarenko asked some questions in her report. The first question was about the role of the receptive aesthetics of Jaus Iser. The receptive aesthetics of Wolfgang Insert and Hans Robert was taken into account when I was writing my dissertation, and I mentioned this fact in my introduction. These scholars write about the strategy of the text and the strategy of the reader. So I draw upon these authors when I describe the term literary strategy. However, my overall objection was not to study the reader of self-published literature. However, my work overlaps with some problems which are related to the problems of receptive aesthetics. In my dissertation, I analyzed the discussion between Krivulin and Groisman. Krivulin insisted that the unofficial culture has a specific recipient which is related to the author's literary experience. This idea was connected with the aesthetic experience. He also asked me if it was possible to use receptive aesthetics to study the reader of self-published literature. This is an open question. The literature of the self-published literature was not centrally given to readers, was not centrally distributed. So I suppose it is quite difficult to use these aesthetics. However, some scholars conduct interviews in order to study the reader of self-published literature. The next question was about the concept by Haydn, White and Kozelek. I mention their concepts in my dissertation, and they focus only on some aspects. I suppose that the use of their concepts allow me to clarify, allow me to provide insight into how Krivulin constructs the historical narrative and which metaphors he uses. This allowed me to identify the salient features of his historical imagination. I also analyze his approach to Russian poetry. He believes that Russian poetry is something unified, similar to the organic structure of the chorals. So Krivulin uses the organic metaphor here, which is discussed in works by Hayden White. Besides, White and Kozelek also explain how history and discourse are connected. And in Krivulin's idea, history exists in the form of the poetic language. So I suppose this is an important aspect in uncensored poetry. Professor Titarenko also asked me about the methodological framework. She asked me about Yuri Lotman and his cultural works. I did not use them in my dissertation. I would like to say that his works are quite important. However, I would like to emphasize that I did not focus on the semiotic studies. Moreover, semiotics is an important aspect of the intellectual history of 1970s. And I regard semiotics as a context to analyze Krivulin's works. I write about it in the third chapter of my dissertation. For example, I write that the mindset of late Soviet intellectual humanitarian focused on semiotic studies. So I would like to say that the cultural project, Krivulin's cultural project, is built into the context of the intellectual history of Russian philology of 1970s, 1980s. As for Igor Smirnov's history, mega history, I would like to say that I read it very quickly while I was writing the dissertation. He also asked me about the sociology, the sociological guidelines. I would like to thank you for this comment. Professor Bugaeva also asked a similar question. She said that I should have drawn upon the works by Mikhail Berg. I distance myself from Berg's theory or from Pierre Bourdieu's sociological approaches for various reasons. I would like to say that Mikhail Berg has very interesting ideas in his works. Beside his monograph is an exhaustive research of unofficial literature, which uses the sociological approach by Pierre Bourdieu. However, I would like to say a couple of critical remarks regarding the work by Michael Berg. He divided culture into underground and official culture, and he uses such terms as the space of success, symbolic capital, when he talks about unofficial literature. However, unofficial literature had weak institutional aspect. There was no hierarchy, there was no institute of criticism, there were no royalties, there was no economy, there was no the institute of reputation when it comes to unofficial literature. So Berg turns sociological concepts into the metaphorical concepts. In my work, I include the analysis of some social contexts. However, I focus on the poetics of literary works. I would like to now I would like to comment on the critical remarks by Lyubov Bugaeva. She mentions that the magazines were reprinted. I would like that this is a debatable issue. I did not write at length about it in my dissertation. However, I write about the distribution of Krivulin's works. So they were distributed in Leningrad self-published literature, including such magazines as The Clock and 37. So we cannot say that the poets were reprinted when they found their way to the self-published literature which was published abroad. And I suppose that we can say that in his correspondence with his colleagues, it is written that some magazines published abroad are getting ready to publish his poems, this poem. We also know that he sent his poets abroad with students, with international students. Besides, his poets were first published abroad in 1975, when the magazines 37 and The Clock did not exist. Professor Kornelia Ichin also asked some questions. She asked me about Baratynsky as part of the literary strategy. Here I would like to say that Baratynsky's literary work had a great impact on Krivulin. Baratynsky was very important for his literary strategy and for his literary works. Viktor Krivulin writes himself that he read Baratynsky a lot, and he even stopped realizing where his own voices and where Baratynsky's voices. And he also writes about the anonymity, and I write about the anonymity in my dissertation. So Baratynsky was sort of marginalized. He was at the margins of the literary system. And I would like to say that Vasily Komarovsky also had an impact on Krivulin's work. Krivulin writes about Komarovsky in one of his papers, and he says that Komarovsky's literary work is even more important than Mandelstam's works. So Krivulin always had a center and a margin, and the authors that were in the margin were more important for Krivulin. So there are different stages here, and some scholars even wrote papers about the influence of Baratynsky on Krivulin's work. He also asked me about Krivulin's poetry, and you asked me to compare them with the papers, or rather with the poets written by some other poets. So Krivulin wrote a number of articles on spirituality, and the authors you mentioned wrote the so-called spiritual lyrics. Елена Шварц, Pyotr Chaygin, Leonid Aranzon and some others are among those authors. So Krivulin included them all in the representatives of Leningrad unofficial poetry. Your third question was about Krivulin's article about the formalists. That's a very important issue. In this article, Viktor Krivulin criticizes Soviet literary studies, namely he criticizes Professor Tynyanov. According to Krivulin, they focus or non-metaphysical aspect of the language. And unofficial literature tries to restore the metaphysical layer of the language, and it tries to work with these specific lexics and with these semantics. So Victor Krivulin built his specific concept of the language. So he wrote about the language which was devoid of some layers, and the Soviet prose was devoid of stylistics, was devoid of the upper layer. Thank you. That is all that I would like to say. Thank you very much. Dear members of the Dissertation Council, are you satisfied with the answers? Professor Ichin, are you satisfied? Yes, I am satisfied. Professor Bogayeva, are you satisfied with the answers? Yes, I am satisfied. However, I would like to say that there was some hierarchy. And I would like to say that some magazines were reprinted also. So there were some conflicts, there was some hierarchy. There were some borderlines. But I would like to say that the answer was I'm really impressed by Mr. Khairulin's answer. Professor Litsky, are you satisfied with the answers? Yes, I would like to say that I'm satisfied. However, I think I'm talking to the microphone. It was only yesterday that I received a preprint of the book by Всеволод Nekrasov. And it was about Всеволод Nekrasov's poems in the magazine 37. It's just a preprint, and this is a very interesting book. And the book also discusses Krivulin's works. Nekrasov sent 50 poems instead of 10. And I suppose it will be interesting for you to read this book. Thank you very much. Professor Boiva, are you satisfied with the answers? Thank you very much. You talked about the sociological aspect, about the sociological methods. Thank you very much. I'm also satisfied with the answers. Now, I would like to ask if the members of the audience would like to say something. So nobody wants to ask a question. Have we received any questions via email? There are no questions. Therefore, let us continue with the agenda. now I would like to give the floor to the research supervisor. I give the floor to Professor Valieva. Please tell us about the academic degree seeker and his work. Dear colleagues, as a research supervisor, I would like to say a few words about the academic degree seeker, and I would like to characterize him as a person. I have known Timur Khairulin since 2015, when he got admitted as a postgraduate student at our Department of the History of Russian Literature, and he has been working on this topic ever since. First of all, I would like to say that he is a very noble person. Another important personal feature is that he is a single-minded person. He persistently worked on his topic. He continued his work despite the difficult conditions. Another thing I would like to emphasize is that he is ready to listen to other people's advice. However, he is loyal to his researcher's stance. Besides, Timur Khairulin tries to find new methods and new approaches when it comes to studying unofficial literature. I would like to say that Timur Khairulin wrote his research independently, and I would like to emphasize that his research has scientific novelty. He analyzes both poems and literary criticism in his dissertation, and he emphasizes that they are interconnected and they also complement each other when it comes to formulating the literary strategy and formulating the cultural project. Therefore, I believe that Timur Khairulin was able to create a comprehensive research, a comprehensive analysis. And this is the first research which is devoted to Viktor Krivulin in Russia. Thank you. Thank you very much. Does anybody want to say something? So nobody wants to ask a question or to say something, so this is the end of the academic discussion. I would like to ask the members of the Dissertation Council and the academic degree seeker if they have any questions about the procedure of the defense, including questions about online participation of some members of the Dissertation Council. So, are there any questions? Mr. Khairulin, do you have any questions? No. Professor Ichin, do you have any questions? No. Professor Bugaeva, do you have any comments? No. Professor Boiva, what's your opinion? I don't have any questions. Professor Litsky, do you have any questions? It was a pleasure to participate in this session. I also believe that the procedure was duly conducted. We have a chance to have a technical break before we start discussing. The discussion will not be broadcast. Do you think we need such a technical break to discuss the results? I think we don't. I think we don't. No. Now, let us proceed with the agenda. We're beginning the open voting. I will ask each member of the Dissertation Council. Professor Khairulin, do you think Timur Khairulin should be awarded the academic degree? I vote in favor. Let us make sure that we see each other and hear each other. We're beginning the open voting on the issue of conferring the academic degree. Scientific Specialty 591, Russian Literature and Literature of the Peoples of the Russian Federation. It is emphasized that by voting in favor, each member of the Dissertation Council states that item 11 of the order has not been violated. Here I quote: "The academic degree seeker shall make references to the sources that have been used to write the dissertation. If the academic degree seeker used the research findings obtained by the degree seeker themselves or in collaboration, the academic degree seeker shall point this out. Let me remind you that the decision of the Dissertation Council on conferring the academic degree is positive, provided more than 50% of the Council members have voted in favor. This is in conformity with Section 23 of the above-mentioned order." So, Professor Khairulin, what's your opinion? I suppose Timur Khairulin should be awarded the academic degree. Professor Bugaeva, what's your opinion? Timur Khairulin should be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of philological sciences. Professor Boeva, what's your opinion? Timur Khairulin should be awarded the academic degree. Professor Arlitsky, what's your opinion? Timur Khairulin should be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of philological sciences. I'm the member of the dissertation. I'm the chairperson of the Dissertation Council. I also believe that Timur Khairulin should be awarded the academic degree of the candidate of philological sciences. Now we have voted. Out of 5 members of the Dissertation Council, 5 members have voted in favor of conferring the academic degree. Nobody voted against or abstained from voting. So Timur Khairulin is awarded the academic degree of the candidate of philological sciences, Scientific Specialty 591, Russian Literature and Literature of the Peoples of the Russian Federation. Now I would like to give the floor to Timur Khairulin for the closing speech. I would like to thank the members of the Dissertation Council for reading my dissertation. And I would like to say that your comments are really valuable. I would like to thank the St. Petersburg State University and the Department of the History of Russian Literature. I would like to say that while studying at St. Petersburg State University, I was able to expand my horizons. I also would like to thank Donetsk National University and my professors from Donetsk University. I would like to thank Professor Koroblev, who was my first research supervisor and who showed me that philology is an existentially serious science. I would like to thank the Institute of Russian Literature, Pushkin House, for the opportunity to work with their funds. I would like to thank Olga Kushvina, she helped me to get access to some works I would like by Viktor Krivulin. I also would like to thank my wife who supported me, and I would like to thank my research supervisor, Professor Valieva. I would like to say that Professor Valieva is an exemplary scholar for me. And thanks to her, I could outline the scope of my dissertation. Her advice was really helpful, and her assistance allowed me to write this dissertation. And I hope this research will be continued in the future. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the technical research, and we would like to thank Professor Ichin for reading the dissertation. And I hope for further partnership. We know your scholarly works very well, and your scientific work is also important for us. I would like to thank the other members of the Dissertation Council, Professor Boyva, Professor Bugaeva, and I would like to thank Yuri Arlitsky, who came here from Moscow. So thank you very much. Please switch off the broadcast.